AP U.S. History, Chapter 17, Manifest Destiny and its Legacy. And I got notes from the American Pageant, the 13th edition. It starts with the accession of Tyler II, and that was the nickname for Tyler because it basically rhymed it with Tippecanoe and Tyler II. And Tippecanoe was William Harrison. So it starts with prominent Whig leaders like Henry Clay and Daniel Webster, and they nominated Harrison because he was easy to control as president. Clay had too many enemies, so they didn't nominate him yet. He has his time later. Unfortunately for him, he did not wear a coat on his inauguration. It was one of the coolest days in Washington, D.C. history, and it was the longest inauguration speech ever, so he died after contracting pneumonia only 4 weeks into his presidency. So, much to Henry Clay and Daniel Webster's dislike, Tyler II ascended to the presidency. He had mostly Democratic views, and he was only in the Whig Party because he hated Jackson, pretty much. He disagreed with his party on every issue. He did not want National Bank. They wanted National Bank. He did not want a protective tariff. They wanted a protective tariff, and he did not want internal improvements. And we all know Henry Clay was the founder of internal improvements. And he was a Virginia Southerner, which disgusted Clay and Webster because, as you know, sectional tensions were rising at this time. It was just not a good fit for either of them. Okay, so John Tyler was a pretty ineffective president. He didn't really do much. He used a lot of his vetoes. The Whigs unveiled their new platform, which included financial reform and a new national bank. See, again, Tyler was a Democrat disguised in Whig clothing, so he did not want a national bank. He was good at first, and he agreeably passed a law ending the independent treasury system, which was where each state had its own bank that would take care of their own state's funds. So it was basically a states' rights issue. But he vetoed a new national bank bill. He also vetoed a new protective tariff bill, but he eventually signed one because the country was in a recession, and he knew they needed to generate revenue somehow. He did push down rates to the 1932 level. We all know the crisis of not 1932, 1832. We all know the crisis of 1832 and the nullification. But he pushed it down to the levels after that, which was 32%. Shocker, we hate England. There is a war of words with England. American and British magazines ripped each other's countries apart. Fortunately, there was no actual fighting. In the early 1800s, America was borrowing and England was lending. So when the Panic of 1837 happened, a lot of English lenders lost their money in American markets because Americans overborrowed and could not pay it back. Also, in 1837, there was a Canadian rebellion, and we supplied them with arms and other supplies. So obviously, the British did not like that, and so they set our ship, the Carolina Fire. So tensions were very tough with England at that time. They were later calmed, but in 1842 they were sparked again because British officials offered amnesty to slaves who incited riot. So that was did not go over well, especially with a Southerner as president. So we had troubles with the British in Maine also. We had disputed territory at the northern border of Maine. If you look up disputed territory in Maine, it will show you on Google. The Aroostook War was a war of basically lumberjacks from Canada and America, and they just fought it out. Luckily, Lord Ashburton came and he negotiated with Webster, and it gave the British their desired road, but it gave us most of the land. So I think we got the best of the deal. America also got land near the Great Lakes in Minnesota, and that proved to be a huge deal because that later we discovered had iron, and that was one of the benefits that Britain really missed out on. So Texas is all alone. Texas had just declared independence from Mexico in 1836, and Mexico considered Texas to be a province in revolt, but Texas considered itself to be an independent state, so it really wanted annexation into the United States for protection. But seeing as that wasn't happening, Texas made treaties with France, Holland, and Belgium, and we were not happy because the Monroe Doctrine, which forbade European countries from colonizing America, would be violated, and that was not something that we wanted to happen. And also, the cotton from Texas would compete with Southern cotton, so that was also not beneficial to our economy. So we couldn't decide what to do. The North was very against us. They declared a Southern slaveocracy, which meant that the South would just conspire to expand slavery in every aspect. And America could not annex Texas without Mexican War, which we also were not in support of yet. And Britain wanted an independent Texas to check our expansion, because at this moment it's the height of Manifest Destiny, and we are all gearing up to go expand as far west as we can. So there was a mandate for expansion. When James K. Polk was elected in 1844, his election was seen as a mandate for Manifest Destiny. So Tyler annexed Texas as a lame duck president. Mexico complained, but in reality, Texas had been free for almost 10 years, and it wasn't really theirs anymore. We had Oregon fever, obviously. We all wanted to move west. It was Manifest Destiny. Oregon was occupied at that time by U.S. and Britain. Remember the 1818 treaty where we divided Britain? We decided to coexist there with Britain. They both had good claims to the land. Americans had a bit more of a claim because they had more people there. And the Oregon Trail was a common route to Oregon in the early 1840s. So the election of 1844. There's two candidates, Henry Clay. In the major parties, there were two candidates. Henry Clay was a Whig, and James K. Polk was a Democrat. Polk advocated zealously for Manifest Destiny, but Clay straddled the issue, so that lost him votes because the Liberty Party, they did not want the expansion. It was a very close race, though not close if you look at the electoral count, but it was close in terms of popular vote. Polk laid out a 4-point plan, and he achieved all 4 points in 4 years, so he was a pretty successful president. He lowered the tariff from 32% to 25%. He restored independent treasuries in 1846. He cleared up the Oregon border issue. He divided it at the 49th parallel after negotiations with England. We got more land again. We're just awesome like that. And he also annexed California after the Mexican War. We'll talk about that. American blood on American, quote, soil. Polk, he forced a showdown when he marched troops into disputed territory, and he knew that they would attack us if we went into this disputed territory, and he needed the American people to rally behind him if he wanted Congress to declare war. And he really wanted California. He wanted California that badly. Obviously, Mexican troops attacked, and the attack was used as leverage for declaration of war. Lincoln and the spot resolutions. Lincoln wanted to know exactly where we were attacked because he said, well, we were in Mexican territory. Obviously, we provoked the attack, and that was true, but Polk didn't want to say that. It was disputed territory. Congress declared war, and that began the Mexican-American War. We did win the war. We mastered Mexico. The Southwest operations were led by Stephen W. Kearny and John C. Fremont. Zachary Taylor, future president, fought in Mexico, and Winfield Scott was a future presidential candidate. led American troops and conquered Mexico City. We tried to negotiate a a truce, peace treaty, and it was called the Treaty of Guadalupe and Hidalgo, and it gave American all Mexican territory from Texas to California, reaching all the way to the Pacific Ocean, obviously, and it was north of the Rio Grande, which was the lowest point in our disputed territory. So we did get all of what we wanted. Some people wanted to go for all of Mexico, but leaders like Calhoun saw that that was reaching too far. And it was called the Mexican Cession, and we paid Mexico $15 million for it, which is amazingly cheap. I think that's what we paid for the Louisiana Purchase, which is, if you think about it, we added a third of our country, and we took half of Mexico's. All Mexican debts to U.S. were absolved. And the war was so unpopular with the Whigs, so Polk really had to get this passed through quickly to end the war and keep his popularity up. There's pros and cons in Mexico. The pros were that outside countries now respected us. There was only 13,000 dead, and it was mostly from disease, so it wasn't really a costly war. It wasn't costly at all in terms of money. It was actually less than the $25 million that Polk had originally wanted to pay for only California. It was about $18 million, which was amazingly cheap. It was practice for the Civil War. Robert E. Lee and Ulysses S. Grant both fought in the war, and as we know, they were both the major Confederate and Union generals. The Wilmot Proviso was that slavery should never exist in any of the Mexican Cession territories. Another loss of the war is it brought attention to slavery and the expansion issue, and it would later plague the nation. The Wilmot Proviso opened the slavery issue, and it was the same topic that actually started the Civil War 13 years later. The war also left us with strained tensions with Mexico that really wouldn't go away. Do you remember the Zimmerman telegraph from World History? Yeah, that was from Mexico. Then that was from Hitler to from World War II. It was Hitler to Mexico saying that he would help reclaim Mexican land. So obviously they weren't over it. Okay, and that is chapter 17 of The American Pageant, and it's all about Manifest Destiny. Thanks for watching.